And just like that, we are back. Chapter 47 of the universe, according to Mugsy. I am Mugsy the creator. And today is Friday, September 27, 2024. And it is a beautiful, gorgeous day. One of the first ones of fall. So I figured, how could we not do this out here in the sunlight? See what's going on, what we have to catch up on in the world. I was at a wedding this past weekend. I think that's a great place to start. Oh, my audience knows so little about me. Now, looking at me right now, I don't think there are very many people out there in YouTube, Patreon land, maybe a little Twitter land, that thinks that this gentleman has attended 4 digits of weddings, at least 4 digits of weddings, in every way, shape, and fashion of attending a wedding that you could do, with the exception of being the groom, or the best man, actually. That's right, I've even been the bride. No, okay, there's some things I haven't been yet. Now, how does one get to be age 27, 28 maybe, in this brand new camera that we're using? That's right, we'll see how this comes out. I'm not even sure if this is going to come out. That's because I've worked them. I know weddings inside and out almost as well as I know an economy. Probably just as well as I know current events, culture, and consciousness. I know what's supposed to be happening in the kitchen at a wedding. I know what's supposed to be happening in the dish room at a wedding. I know when the bride is planning a dance with her bridesmaids that she should have been working on, I don't know, maybe 6 months leading up to the wedding. Delaying the first dance and the toasts. What other things do I know about weddings? All right, guys, I have worked thousands, hundreds, if not 4 digits, at least 1,000 weddings on top of all the ones that I've attended. So I know these things inside and out. It's like a glove. And this one was no different. It was gorgeous. They are so enjoyable. The weird thing about it is, despite the fact of this rant that I may go on for the next 5 to 7 minutes, you will not know how much I enjoy these. I love them. It is one of the only times in our society where people are comfortable expressing some sort of emotion with each other publicly. That happens so very rarely. Weddings and funerals, maybe. Perhaps because drinking's involved. Perhaps because you're committing your life to another person, or celebrating a life that just finished. I don't know exactly why. So despite all the things that I'm about to say, Shannon and Kevin, I want you to know that I had such an amazing time, and I thank you so much for inviting me to your beautiful wedding so that I could share that special moment with you. Now, getting into it, they're all a blast in their own unique way. I have found that the twists that we used to put on some of the weddings maybe a decade ago, where you would have a party favor, and it would be in the shape of, I don't know, Buzz Lightyear. And that's how we would know that, oh, wow, you're a big Disney fan, and you really like Toy Story because your little party favor that you take home at the end of the night was a Buzz Lightyear. And that's how we're clued into Shannon and Kevin are Buzz Lightyear fans. But I don't know how we've gotten to this place. Honestly, people have gotten so comfortable. Maybe COVID had something to do with it. But when we stopped going to work in our best dress, there was such a lack of differentiation between times of professionalism and times of casualness. And because of this, I feel like those two time frames sometimes get misconstrued. What once was a party favor has now become a full-blown everybody join in on my wildest fantasy, which, hey, maybe a lot of weddings were that, and that was just not the type of weddings we were hosting at Danversport Yacht Club during the 2000s to 2010s and all the other weddings that I went to. But It's just a different level. I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I think it's awesome when you see people come out with lightsabers and Boba Fett masks and Darth Vader helmets. I think these are cool things. I think maybe society needs to take themselves a little less seriously sometimes. But in the same breath, you are asking me to drive across the country, get in a plane, get in a car, drive a couple hours, maybe book a hotel room, spend a significant portion of money, all so that I can help you indulge in these fantasies you have about being some sort of Jedi Knight or Disney princess or whatever. I think what it comes down to is it is no more or less than an adult prom, which is exactly what you make of it. Some people love prom. Some people hated prom. Some people were just trying to find somebody to go to the prom with, which you can find all of those different characters inside a wedding, which is why I enjoy all of them so equally, because each one is so different. And I always find a way. One of my favorite games to play at a wedding is pick out the most interesting person and then try and have a conversation with that person. Just because there's the uniqueness of a wedding in and of itself, the first place, right? You have a bride, which has her whole side of the family, and you have a groom who has his whole side of the family. These two sides, you would think, have met. But I've been at weddings where they have gotten in fistfights, and it's been on the cover of papers, not only in this country, but making international news across the pond in Britain. So just because you think they're supposed to go a certain way doesn't mean they're going to go a certain way. Sometimes one side of the family doesn't realize that the other side of the family is indulging in this Disney fantasy or Star Wars fantasy. Just using that as an excuse, you can pick and replace that with whatever. I'm sure there were plenty of Barbie weddings this year with those movies going on. That's indulging in some sort of ridiculous fantasy, like a prom theme. But hey, I digress. Like I said, try and find some interesting characters at the wedding and sidle up next to them. I was dating somebody in the wedding party, the bridal party specifically. So this is a unique type of guest at a wedding, right? You have family members, they're doing their own thing. You have friends that are a little more distant. They might be hanging out in the back. But if a friend that's a little more distant hanging out with in the back tries to, I don't know, dance with the bride's daughter, let's say she's got a young kid, sometimes that's a little weird. That's the job of like the best man or something. So don't you be playing some role that you're not supposed to be playing at these weddings. That's one way to avoid trouble. This is just a wedding advice podcast. This is great. I have so much information and knowledge that probably a lot of you that are going to be guests at weddings could use. But anyways, so I have no date, right? Because if you were at a wedding with somebody in the bridal party, they are in the ceremony. So you're coming and arriving alone. You're sitting there watching the ceremony alone. You may or may not know the bride and the groom. You may be casual friends, maybe you met him a few times. Maybe you haven't met him. Maybe you haven't met him at all yet. Maybe you are a date of somebody in the bridal party and you haven't met any of these people. So now you're going to a wedding where you really don't know anybody, dressed up in your best attire, and you get to do nothing but play at somebody else's prom. So of course, I'm going to be sitting with some of the other bridesmaids, boyfriends, husbands, dates. And like I said, I always find the most interesting people. So I got to know a Muay Thai MMA fighter, as well as a concierge at a high-end Boston hotel, and we got to shoot the shit. I don't think these guys had any idea what they were getting involved in, having conversations sidled up next to me. I am a crazy person with a podcast. I'm a consultant and a waiter who runs around and gets things for people just for fun. On top of that, I think that they may have thought I was exaggerating my wedding knowledge as things started getting moving operationally, right? Because operationally, I don't care what your job is. You could be an engineer. You could be a mechanic. You could be a cop. there are operations that you come into every day to do your job, right? Just think about it in your everyday life. When you wake up, what do? You take a piss, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, you take a shower, you have a cup of coffee. These are the operations that I'm talking about. No different than a wedding. But these, I don't think the Muay Thai fighter and the concierge knew that I was going to know everything that was happening. Because there was a moment in time where they're like, oh, I wonder how many hors d'oeuvres we should eat. You know, I'm looking at my watch. I said, we got about 45 more minutes of hors d'oeuvres. Then they're going to move us into the wedding. We're going to do a couple of toasts. They're going to do some first dances. And these guys are like, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, buddy, you fucking weirdo. What did you say you do again? You run a podcast? How the hell do you know the operations of how this wedding is going to function? Don't you worry about that, friend. Don't you worry about that. I predict the future. Okay, that's all you need to know. It doesn't matter whether I'm doing it on my podcast, whether I'm doing it with current events, whether I'm doing it with culture, whether I'm doing it with your own consciousness, which I can observe and you're not yet tapped into. Okay, I'm pretty fucking good at this shit. So can we relax with the self-doubt? You just showed up to a wedding and you didn't even know you met the next first Joe Rogan. Okay, guys? Oh, the doubt. Jesus Christ, I could cut that wedding up in so many different ways. All right? But I had to play my role. I had to sit back. I had to make sure that I was there for the date, right? The bridal party, if they needed anything. I had to make sure that I was available to dance, right? Because you have to be able to turn on that dance mode when you need to be out there dancing with the bridal party. But at the very same time, you need to be letting them do their own thing. Right? They're dancing. They know each other. This is their prom. This is their night. There may be a choreographed dance that they're coming up with in the back, which I called because the speeches were late. I know you, Shannon. I knew you were choreographing a little dance to come out with out back. There's nothing you can do. And Kevin, don't you think I didn't know you were smoking a blunt? Of course I knew you were smoking a blunt. You just got done committing your life to somebody. I could smell that in the air, and what else would you be doing while you were waiting for your wife to choreograph a dance to come out to? I know so much about weddings. I could sniff out exactly where the dessert tables were going to be. I knew when we were going to be eating so that I could plan my walk to the parking lot, and the parking lot was actually just outside this little tent, to smoke a little bit of weed right before my meal was served. I'm telling you, I have this stuff down to a T. Oh, and it was great. It was so fun. I hope you all get a chance to go to a couple weddings, but I hope you are not required to go to too many of them. And I think we're at a point now in society where maybe we're a little more selective. That is not to say to my boys out there that might watch this that I don't love you and I wouldn't have very much enjoyed coming to your wedding, but I've just seen this. I've played this game so many times. I've been to so many proms. I've been to so many dances. Do I really need to go to yours too? Why don't you call me and come hang out? Why don't you come sit down on this broadcast, the Universe According to Mugsy. All of you are invited. Kevin, Shannon, anybody's wedding I didn't attend, and tell me a story, or let's dive into your inner self-delusions and let's talk about those. I can't wait until we have enough success here on this broadcast that we start having some real conversations, because there are some nutballs out there. There were a couple at that wedding. Who does Muay Thai, MMA? You got to be crazy. I'm sure that's exactly what he thought about me. Who puts himself out there on a podcast like this and just speaks nothings into nobody's ears? I don't know, dude. It's a little easier than trying to avoid getting kicked in the head. But, there's nothing I like than having a conversation with somebody who is on a different journey than you are. And what journeys have been going on? I don't know where this broadcast is going to go. I just really wanted to test out this new camera, this microphone, and this new recording studio in the beautiful sunlight today. But there were a couple stories I have been picking up on. It is getting to be election time. We are a month out. I have 24 more shifts at the Village Tavern as a waiter in Salem until November 1st. And the election is just a couple days after that, which means we are in crunch time. There's so many moving parts going on right now. The importance of them won't be revealed until some time in the future. And that is crazy to know that we are living right now through the volatility of those moments. Now, I'm not going to talk in depth about a lot of these stories, but I'm rather just going to touch on a couple of the stories that we will be opening up like a flower over the coming weeks. And one of them is the economy, right? We touched on the interest rates last week and how the Federal Reserve dropping the federal funds rate 0.5 percentage point is going to further fuel inflation and the war that's currently going on the poor, right? The lower class, the slave class. And it is so great to do these things outside. I love sitting here in the sun. Inflation and all that it's doing. Now, China jumped in with a $150 billion bailout of their banking system, which is controlled by the CCP, right? It is a communist state where the government and private business is gray area and both are controlled together. That is the largest bailout since the banking bailout of 2008. And if China is already in those troubles, we know that we are already in our own troubles. It is very tough for the White House, the Federal Reserve Bank, the chairman of the board of governors of the Federal Reserve Bank, as well as a lot of the commentary coming out by people in banking. That would be CEOs of large banks, be that JP Morgan, be it Goldman Sachs, be it Citigroup, Bank of America, appears to be in a lot of trouble. Now, how do I know that? Not even having casually glanced at a Wall Street Journal within the past month. Just follow the money. Like we're always talking about, politicians, CEOs of large corporations have been selling stock. That is because these are the most efficient capital allocators we have in our current economic system. What does a capital allocator do? That is someone that takes a little bit of money and they turn it into a lot of money. And we've talked about this before. Who are the most efficient capital allocators in our society today? You will know the names of these people. These are the Jeff Bezos of the world, the people who started Amazon. These are the people that Eric Schmidt, he was the CEO. The two people who started Google, Sergey and something Brin, right? These are the Steve Jobs who started Apple, the Bill Gates, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. They take a little bit of money and they turn that into a lot of money. These are efficient capital allocators. Warren Buffett is chief among them. So when Warren Buffett is dumping his stock in a particular bank, you can be damn certain that that bank is going to face troubles in the near future. Otherwise, Warren Buffett would be buying stock at a discount. Right now, smart people, and I say smart people because these are people that have proven themselves to be efficient capital allocators over time, have decided that the stock market is overvalued. The value of their shares of stock, one piece of a company, right? That's what a share of stock is. It is an ownership percentage of a corporation. The people who own the most percentage of a corporation are usually the people that started the company, the CEOs, the board of directors, the people at the top. They have the most skin in the game. They also know what's coming. They have the best outlook of the future, or they should, because they should understand the business best. So when these people are selling shares of their stock, it's because they believe their stock is overvalued. That's what our capital allocators are doing in today's market. Combine that with the fact that China is bailing out its entire banking sector with the most money that it's decided to dump into its banking sector, not since COVID, which was the last economic downturn, but since the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, where there was a massive liquidity issue in the world markets. So, like I said, that is an issue that we are not going to dive into today. We're not going to go super deep into that. but it's something we're going to keep an eye on, and it's something that's going to continue to unfold because the stock market is going to be at a very interesting place. That doesn't mean a lot for many people in society, but as an indicator of the overall health of the economy, it will play a role. Now, this is going to play a role no matter what, because most of your retirements are tied up. Mutual funds, 401ks, Roth IRAs, those are all tied up in the stock market. So no matter what, whether you don't have any investments at all, if you have a family, those people, maybe they're retired folks, old folks, the largest generation that we have, the baby boomer generation, which is right in the middle of retirement. What happens if the stock market takes a massive dive and the people that are supposed to be living off the interest of those stocks no longer have the nut to produce the income generation that they are used to or they had planned on? Things are going to get kicked into overdrive here. And not just in an economic sense. Economics is just one way the lower class is going to start feeling the pressure. Because what else is going on? There were a couple stories here. Let's talk about Chamath Palihapitiya. I think, let's go back even further than that. Let's go back a couple weeks to the Martyr Made podcast that I was talking about with Daryl Cooper. And the fact that I know there's nobody watching this because nobody corrected me. I went on a tangent for 5 to 7 minutes talking about the Martyr Made podcast and Joe Rogan, and how Joe Rogan is such a good friend of mine because he keeps me abreast of all the important things that are going on. I made a mistake there. It wasn't Joe Rogan whose podcast that I was listening to, and I completely flubbed that. It was Dave Smith, comedian Dave Smith, who's been talking about the Martyr Made podcast over the past 6 to 9 months, almost incessantly, because there are so few people that are as brilliant or researchers and as curious as Joe Rogan. And Dave Smith, a comedian as well, is definitely one of those people. I thought it was important to go back and cover that because it's probably going to be somewhat of my role in this as we discuss the current events, the culture, and the consciousness simultaneously. We'll be introducing a lot of our audience, my new friends, the podcast listeners or viewers, to a lot of the important tastemakers in our society today. So as Daryl and the Martyr Made podcast is starting to take its ascent on the cultural scale, where it has become more of an influential podcast that has a larger reach and a larger audience, I think it's important to talk about, again, more of the conversations that are going on. We've talked about Eric Weinstein, and we've talked about Terrence Howard, the conversations that they had on the Joe Rogan Experience, and we've talked about the All In podcast, Chamath Palihapitiya, David Sachs, David Friedberg, and Jason Calacanis. They are a group of men who I guess would be giving us the perspective from Silicon Valley, as the four of them do most of their work in Silicon Valley. Chamath Palihapitiya was one of the men who helped monetize Facebook for Mark Zuckerberg. Now, that made Chamath Palihapitiya a very rich man. When he, quote-unquote, retired from Facebook, he had a large chunk of money he was sitting on. One of the things he did was start a private equity fund and a hedge fund, investing in businesses as well as startups as well as equities on the stock market. I have continually utilized Chamath's insights, which is why I would consider Chamath, as well as Joe and Dave, a friend of mine. Now, I love my friends, but they're all unique and different. Chamath's insights don't always come when he is intending to provide them. A lot of the insights that he provides on the tech sector are no more or less accessible to a large audience than it would be to get the PE ratio of any stock, right? A lot of the things I can find out by doing my own analysis of the stock market, but the insights, the brilliance of what I have learned from Chamath Palihapitiya is what it's like to live in that percentage of class and see the world from the top of an institution like Facebook and the view that he sees the rest of society with, the lens that he is able to look through, provides me insights that are super helpful in maximizing the areas that I would like to maximize. Now, those areas for me and Chamath are completely different. Chamath really wants to maximize his return on investment in a capitalistic sense. He really wants to make money. Now, that has afforded him a lot of time. Now, I am less focused on the money-making aspect, and I am much more focused on maximizing my time so that I can do whatever I see fit, which is how I have been able to make so many friends in so many different groups and put the puzzle of the world together. Because the insights that I gain from my friends, Chamath Palihapitiya, and my diverse group of friends, the different lenses that my friends see through, provide me the ability to put the puzzle together in my own time. And I am not the smartest. Oh, I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb in so many ways. So if I can do this, and if I'm finding so much success, then I know that you, whoever you are out there, will have just as much success once you finally commit to doing whatever it is you want to do, creating the environment necessary. And part of that environment is the time. Now, that requires a lot of things that Chamath has that the rest of us don't have. And part of that is the ability to provide for yourself, right? So if you want to live a life like Chamath and I, you need to really tool down the necessities, the things that you need to get through in your everyday life. The difference between myself and Chamath is Chamath has the money to provide all of that for him, right? When you have billions of dollars, you can figure out what the healthiest food is, buy it, and pay someone to cook it for you so that you don't have to waste any of your time doing those things. Now, that is only useful if you are using your time, energy, and intention, right, your consciousness, to use that time more efficiently, right? If you can use that time more efficiently somewhere else, it makes sense to have somebody else sourcing all of that for you. But I think what I have found is there is a relationship quantum mechanically between intention, energy, and effort within yourself. So me doing those things for myself could hypothetically lead to a larger payoff because I am using all of my intention, my consciousness, my effort, my energy, my frequency, and my vibration is all towards one common goal. That goal is to provide myself a healthy meal that requires me to go on a journey to do so. So perhaps I am having different success in that realm. Now, that is a conversation I would love to have with Chamath. I don't know that I'm going to be able to have the opportunity to do so, but that is part of the reason that I started this platform right here. God forbid there's a chance that he comes across it. I hope that idea, the idea that somebody on the other side of the spectrum, the other side of the camera, the other side of, from an operational standpoint, Facebook, right? He was the top. and I was the complete bottom, the user on the other end. If you can get yourself to a point where you have love and empathy for everyone, and everyone has something to teach you, oh, I think that's when you will have more success putting the puzzle together, because some of the conversation I encourage you to go listen to on your own with Joe Rogan and Chamath was great. It was an introductory conversation where two people were clearly getting to know each other, and there was value in these two's perspectives. And it was enlightening in some way for an audience. The enlightenment is all what you make of it. Now, for the first hour, Chamath was talking about education and energy, and how in the future these systems are going to be completely and totally retooled and revamped. He highlighted a lot of the inefficiencies that we are dealing with, both on an educational and energy-specific society today, our culture, and how it's dealing with these things. And he talked very confidently about how all of it was going to be retooled. He did not provide very many specifics. So when you talk for 45 minutes about something, and with confidence, and you fail to outline directly how we're going to get in real time where we are at today to that future that you're highlighting, other than to say AI is going to figure it out for me, I don't have a lot of confidence in the words that are coming out of your mouth. You start to sound like some snake oil salesman. Because if we were to look at society today, and we were to say, who has the most power to get these things done? Who is it? Is it a computer system that hasn't been developed yet? Or is it somebody with billions of dollars sitting in the tech capital of the world, having conversations with some of the most important, most powerful government leaders, business leaders, social leaders, cultural leaders of our time? You were one of those people. What are you doing standing around talking about how maybe in one day, eventually, we're going to get to this perfect place? You are the person that needs to be involved in doing that. Nonetheless, you are insightful and you do bring important insights. We know how bad and poor the quality of our food is because we are living the effects of that being manifest through our body every day in our lives. Guess what? We are the poor class. We have to worry about how we're going to feed ourselves and what we're going to put in our body and how our body's going to run with that. In this discussion, they talked about how Chamath wore a glucose monitor for 90 days, and he discovered that his body had a different response to the way that pasta was cooked. That's interesting. It's interesting how somebody who's in between two jobs, trying to pick up kids, take them to soccer practice, trying to put a roof over their head, someone that's thinking about whether they should pay the electric bill or whether they should heat their house in the coming winter months, doesn't necessarily have the time to be figuring out whether they're cooking their pasta al dente or a little bit more well done. But the insights are extremely important because we will find ways to overcome these struggles if we focus enough of our intent and energy on it. Because it was not but a couple of years ago, Joe Rogan was explaining to me how he does full-on intravenous vitamin drips regularly. Now, shit. At that time, I had no money. But I was trying to come up with a way where I could do something similar because I found value in what he was talking about. Long-term sustained vitamin intake is probably very good for the overall health and conditioning and wellness of your body, which is very important to me. So how could I get access to these vitamins, introduce them into my body in a way that it would receive them and utilize them as best possible, right? Because one of the things that you learn when you start actually investigating your health is that just because you are ingesting certain amounts of vitamins and nutrients doesn't mean that your body's utilizing them, because there are certain things that make nutrients more or less bioavailable. If you're taking turmeric, you should also be taking it with black pepper. Now, some of these things you will just get lucky and figure out on your own, just by the luck of the draw, because you have actually gone out there and tried to do something on your own, using your own energy and your own effort. You have tried to improve yourself better ways. Now, we've talked about how even if you go out there and you pick something that's worse for you, right? You pick something that's actually a negative detriment on your health, but you think that it's good for you. Placebo effect has a chance of kicking in and making that thing that is actually negative for you work for your brain, because you have convinced your body that it's actually going to work for you. That in and of itself is crazy. Now, I happen to get lucky because of these long-term drips. I also needed something to drink all the time, so I started drinking tea. As I did research, I found out that most of these herbs and most of these nutrients could be found in ingredients and flowers that are probably growing as weeds in your garden, like dandelions. I had no clue how good dandelions were for you. And then I found out about tea. And I started drinking tea on a regular basis, replacing the coffee and caffeine that I didn't realize was having a negative detrimental effect on my body. Not to mention ingesting a drug that I didn't really need for energy. I have plenty of energy on my own, and I replaced it with something that was significantly healthier, so low cost, doesn't require a medical team to put a needle in my arm. All it requires is a goddamn pot and hot water. If you can provide those things for yourself, then you can provide yourself with slow, regular nutrient intake. And that is really the magic of all of this. So just by Chamath pointing out that, holy crap, the food in this country, because of his 6 weeks in Italy and Europe, which is really where the conversation went, the type of pasta in Europe is much different. And really, all around the world, there are much stricter regulations on the food that we consume. Where in this country, we are very liberal. You may have seen Fruit Loops in a recent congressional testimony. Fruit Loops are different in Canada and the United States. In the United States, they use a lot of unnatural food dyes that are illegal in Canada. In Canada, they produce a product using natural food dyes that is almost exactly the same. Why is there such a difference in the United States? Why are we not taking that more seriously? Why is nobody doing the due diligence for us on the back end? It's because we are not spending the time and energy that we should be focusing on our own health, doing the research that we need to do. We are not holding the FDA to the standards that we should in this country. And that is all a result of our own consciousness, which collectively makes the culture, which results in the current events, which is the conversation that Joe Rogan and Chamath are having. So we have to listen to these two billionaires, more or less. I don't know if Joe's a billionaire yet. Have a conversation about what it's like to spend 6 weeks in Europe and the health effects that it has on your body, right? Now, you can choose to receive that information in whatever way you want. You can look at it from a negative perspective and you can say, oh, I don't have the money to go to Europe. Well, do you have $5 for pasta? Because I think you can find imported Italian pasta using semolina durum wheat for less than $5 a bag. That was the information that my friend Joe and Chamath provided to me, that I had to sift through. I had to listen to all that bullshit Chamath was spewing and listen to Joe be so patient and really get to know this individual from a place of love and empathy and not from a place of judgment where you and I, the listener, may be coming from. And we have to see what insights we can glean from this discussion, from these people that are from a class that you and I couldn't imagine what their day-to-day is like. Not having to worry about anything, right? Not having to worry about utilizing your energy to put the most base requirements of shelter and food and water and health in place for us. So it was a really interesting conversation. I don't know that there are going to be many people that tune into the All In podcast, which is the podcast Chamath is on, and they become full-time Chamath fans. His business insights on the tech sector are great, including the team that he's put together. The All In broadcast is insightful, but at the same time, these men have blind spots that they are not looking to fill in the gaps of. They have yet to pull back the layers of their own perspective that would help them understand maybe what their role is in this current events, culture, and consciousness matrix that we all find ourselves locked up in. And I hope maybe that this is the beginning of those layers of perspective being peeled back among the highest among us, right? The people with the most power, the people with the most money, because without them, this is going to be a daunting task, rebuilding the country that is so clearly falling apart. Perhaps no better evidence of than the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, now facing an indictment for corruption at the same time as an attempt on former president, the second attempt on former President Trump's life is being more or less brushed under the rug by the news media coverage. There's a lot coming out about the shooter, the second shooter, if you are paying attention to the media outlets that are doing research. We talked about Cancel Clothing Co., Ian Carroll, last week, and the initial research he's done, where you can find journalists that are diving into it. I can recommend Glenn Greenwald, and the Timcast IRL broadcast is also diving into a lot more on the background there. But the Eric Adams one is really one I want to spend a little more focus on, as well as a little more follow-up from Diddy. Diddy! We talked about it in a context of rap and culture being hijacked by the military-industrial complex and the surveillance state choosing the artists and promoting the type of culture that they wanted promulgated in society, but it seems like a lot of the interest is actually on Hollywood and these people who have been held up to such high regards by us as a culture, these actors, these musicians, these government officials. We, the society, have put them on this pedestal. And that pedestal was once you were cool if you were hanging out with Diddy. And it seems like everything has changed now. Certainly in regards to being friends with Diddy, because everyone who had a picture with Diddy on social media has now scrubbed their entire mention, any pictures with him. They got rid of them, I think presumably because they know where this is heading. And that seems to be where a lot of the interest has lied. A lot of the people that were close with Diddy, one of whom we talked about as President Barack Obama when he was a former senator from the state of Illinois. Now, why is a rapper so up on his politics that he was able to find this diamond in the rough who would eventually find his way to the highest office in the land of the United States of America, the President of the United States? That's quite impressive, especially if he did so on his own as just a rapper and a Ciroc icon. People have been quick to point out that those 100,000 bottles of baby oil were not baby oil for gay pornography or for raping women. They were GHB, which actually may have been used for rape. or liquid ecstasy or liquid cocaine. Yeah, I know. Relax. We can have a little fun. That's what a joke is. You are hopping onto my timeline on how I am portraying this scenario as if P. Diddy is the #1 producer of homosexual pornography. And that's my vision of the world. If you choose to see it as he was one of the most prolific blackmailers and drug dealers in this country, well, then that's the way that you choose to see it. I'm not saying one way's right or less. I think that the comedy community is going to have a field day with this. And my guess is right now in comedy clubs across the country, comedians are working on this material to see which light they are going to portray P. Diddy in. But yeah, even actors such as Ashton Kutcher, people are really going back and digging into why he was such close friends with Diddy. I don't know if most people knew that there was an incident. Ashton Kutcher was supposed to go on a date with somebody who winded up murdered the night before their date. And this was in his early seasons on That 70s Show right after Dude, Where's My Car? That movie came out. Ashton Kutcher is supposed to go out with a woman who he didn't really know. He was at a Grammys party. Supposed to meet up with her at 8 o'clock. Called her to let him know he was going to be late. Where she, who was also sleeping with the building manager, wound up dead. He thought she stood him up on her date. She was dead in the morning, and there was no investigation opened into Ashton Kutcher, which is really interesting, right? I am not a conspiracy theorist. I just put puzzles together. That's all I do. I'm just finding information, I'm looking at it, and I'm examining it under the different lights, different lenses, different perspectives, some of which is provided to me over time. We're in a different time and space than we were 3 years ago. We're in a different time and space now than when one of Diddy's bodyguards, who provided 45 minutes of testimony for the police in New York City about the underground rap game and how most of the drugs in this country are moved around on private planes, some of which by very prominent rappers. And that is why when they are pinched, right? When an asset is removed, all they have to do is go to the private plane and they find all the drugs that they need to put somebody away. Why? Because they are involved in the drug game as well. Now, I don't know any of that to be true. Who am I to be standing out here accusing people allegedly of things they have or have not done? I don't know. I don't know how the drugs in this country move around. I know they do. I know that plenty of people don't have a problem getting access to them. Maybe they do move around on people's private planes. That would make sense. It would remind me of a Tom Cruise movie we saw not but a few years ago where he was flying private planes for the Contra, working with the CIA and dropping bags of cocaine across this country in Arkansas. So it's not, or it would remind me of another story. Ricky Ross. You guys might have heard of Rick Ross, the Boss rapper. Do you know who Freeway Ricky Ross is and his involvement with the cocaine industry? All right, guys? This is not exactly my first rodeo. So what may sound like a conspiracy theory to you kind of just sounds like everyday travel to other people. So as the insanity of diving into P. Diddy and his life is starting to unfold, do not be surprised when the ties are much darker and deeper than you could have ever imagined initially. It's okay to pull back. It's okay to say, that wasn't the world that I thought we lived in. And someone has pulled the wool over my eyes in some way, shape, or form. That happens to the best of us. We should be grateful for it because that's the only way that we can convince ourselves to move towards this new existence where, oh, wow, we need to get used to the fact that all of the people that have been promoted through the mechanical means of New York Times bestsellers list or Billboard Hot 100 charts have all been rigged against us. Your eyes have been lying to you for some reason. What is that reason? Oh, that's what I think we're going to get to the bottom of as each of these individuals go on their own personal investigations into people like Ashton Kutcher or Barack Obama or the thousands of other people P. Diddy hung out with. How about the children that he took under his wing, like Justin Bieber, Usher, underage adoptions, freak parties, whiteout events, cameras everywhere, the FBI coming in and raiding his house? What is going on? Clearly more than you and I have been allowed to know. And if you are just finding that out now, well, then it's important you understand that what's going on in New York is even bigger than I could imagine at this stage of the game. Because if we are looking at the state of politics, like the Yankees and the Red Sox, Democrats and Republicans, there is one side who is very meticulous and well organized, and that is the left, the Democratic side of things. So for a Democratic mayor of the largest city in the country, New York, Eric Adams, to have threatened at one point to come out and ask for more funds for the illegal immigrants that were being sent to his city, an investigation into his corruption was immediately opened. Now, he wasn't arrested or indicted until apparently this morning. I haven't checked the news yet. Today is Friday, September 27th. It's a little bit surprising, but not so much. Even the tiniest threat of Eric Adams going down to Washington and making a stink about the illegal immigrants in the largest city in the country, New York City, immediately opened up this investigation of Turkish money. And whether or not Eric Adams is corrupt, I cannot tell you. I can tell you that I operate from a place where I assume both teams are 100% corrupt, and that is my default setting. Now, as we as a country have had 2 attempts on a former president's life, and we are investigating corruption of the 6-figure range, hundreds of thousands of dollars, for the mayor of the largest city in our country, 1 month before a presidential election, I would call that selective prosecution. I would call that election interference. I would call that creating a power vacuum in the largest city in this country, filled with countless criminal, illegal aliens at a time right before perhaps one of the largest presidential elections in American history, between someone who received no votes for the United States, the sitting vice president of the United States of America, who has expressed no platform other than joy for her upcoming 4 years as president of the United States, and someone who has been alleged 2-time, what do they call it when they accuse you of a crime while you're a sitting president? 2 times they did that. 4 indictments now. Election interference, left and right. If we were to go back and examine the previous 3 elections going back to 2020, 2016, and 2012, using the new information that Dr. Robert Epstein, PhD, has provided us on the technology side of things, Google, which we talked about in one of the last broadcasts, then we can start to understand, combining that with the Hunter Biden laptop and how that was suppressed before the last election, how all of our elections have seemingly been stolen from us because we cannot provide the voters with even enough information so that they can make an assessment of who will be best for this country. Now that should be very, very eye-opening, right? that here we are 1 month out from this election. There are countless stories of people that are here illegally being registered to vote all across this country. California is processing illegal immigrants into this country faster than they ever have in their recorded history. And we have an election in 4.5, 5 weeks. And we know the last 3 elections have been stolen from us. And there's nothing you and I can do separately to fix that. What can be done? What can be done? All we can do is pull back the veil of our own consciousness and start to understand that this is the life that we lead because of our own personal decisions that collectively make up the culture, which results in the current events that we see before us. That's how we do it. Current events, culture, and consciousness. We tie all 3 together interchangeably. All right? That's what we do here on the universe according to Mugsy. There's a lot we didn't get into. There's so much to cover. The volatility of what's going on politically, socially, and culturally is at a time when I have never seen it this volatile. And I've been following this stuff for a long time. I am 20 years retired economist. So I've been following the markets, business, culture, decision makers, what the country is buying for at least the last 20 years. I've been following information and how it travels. I've been following the operations of how these systems are put together, studying complex systems and how they are interconnected for longer than I can remember. So we're going to continue to keep having these conversations. I hope this new camera gives us a better picture quality. I'm going to see how this audio works into this new software that I'm using, OBS. Anybody out there? I'm using Sony ZV-E10 is the new camera, Alpha Mark 1, and I am using OBS as my new recording software. So if there's anybody out there that knows anything about it, about production, post-production, pre-production, I will take any of the advice that you have out there. If you have a question, if you have something that you would like discussed on this podcast, if you have questions about the universe, how it works, culture, current events, consciousness, submit those questions at patreon.com/Mugsy the Creator. Like, subscribe, comment down below if you're seeing this on YouTube, Twitter, or Rumble. I am Mugsy the Creator. Take back your consciousness. I love you. I'm out.